Hey, howdy, hey, how is everybody doing? And welcome back to Disney Daily. So today, you guys, I have a really big theory for you. And basically, I am going to try to make Pixar's soul fit the epic Pixar theory. Now, obviously, I am releasing this video in advance before Pixar's soul has actually been released to the public. So we'll see whether or not this theory actually holds up once the movie's out, or if it's a dud. So only time will tell. But before I get into the nitty-gritty of this video, I want to go ahead and take a few moments to explain what exactly the Pixar theory is for those that maybe are not familiar with it. So the Pixar theory was proposed by a man named John Negroni, and he actually wrote a book called The Pixar Theory. And basically it states that all of the Pixar films that we know and love exist in the same universe on a gigantic timeline. Now, some of the movies overlap each other. For instance, Toy Story and Finding Nemo, I believe those occur in the 90s, 2000s, but some of those movies never overlap. For instance, The Good Dinosaur is at the very, very beginning of the timeline, and Monsters, Inc. is supposedly at the very, very end. So every time a new Pixar film comes out, everyone basically scrambles to try and make this new film fit into this timeline and tries to see if it actually still holds up. So now that I've explained what the Pixar theory is, I am going to try to place Pixar's soul in that timeline. Now this is going to get kind of complicated, so I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible to follow along. Now the points in the movie where we see Joe as an actual human being who's living and breathing and walking around, that I don't know exactly where that particular part of the movie is going to fit in the timeline. I'll have to watch the movie first so I can get a vibe for what era he's living in. But we do have two separate dimensions that are introduced that I believe are going on simultaneously with all of the Pixar films. So what are those two dimensions? Well, we actually get to see both of those dimensions mentioned in the trailers. Now, the first one is called The Great Beyond, and that's when the soul sadly passes away. And in the movie in particular, we see Joe's soul, who's a little blue entity now. He's going into some weird vortex, it looks like. And I'm gonna go ahead and put pictures down here in this area so you guys can know exactly which part I'm talking about. Now, the other dimension that's mentioned in more detail is called the Great Before. Now, the Great Before is actually my bread and butter to my theory, and this dimension is basically where the souls are made. So this is where they get their personalities, their likes and dislikes before they're actually sent down to Earth. Now again, I'll cycle back to, well, how exactly, Disney Daily, is Soul going on at the same time as all of the other Pixar films? Well, here it is. I believe personally that Soul is going to tie together all of the Pixar films because of the fact that it introduces souls. And souls, I believe, are the key to understanding how exactly all these different Pixar characters come to life. For instance, Woody, Buzz Lightyear, Bo Peep, Lightning McQueen, Wall-E, all of these objects that would normally not be able to come to life in the real world come to life in the Pixar universe, and I believe that is because they have a soul. Now, up until this point, basically people have said that the reason why Woody and Lightning McQueen and all those different characters are able to come to life is because a human loved them before. And because that human loved that object, that is what fueled them and gave them life. And that is where they learned basically how to have a personality and to express themselves. And I really liked that proposal up until this point. And now I really believe that these souls that are being sent down to Earth might actually be inhabiting more than just human beings. And I think that's possible. I mean, anything at this point is possible in the Pixar universe. So I think those souls are sent down, and maybe they're intended to just inhabit human beings, but they end up inhabiting other objects and things and animals. Now, I want to go ahead and jump into more evidence for some of the claims that I've made. So if you've made it this far, Thank you so much for making it this far in my explanation. But now I want to make sure that I give you guys some evidence to back up what I'm saying. So one of the biggest things that I proposed in the beginning of my video was dimensions. Now, I don't want you guys to think that I'm just throwing dimension out there to, you know, an easy way out basically to explain things. I actually believe Pixar has introduced dimensions to us before. So you're probably thinking, which Pixar film features another dimension, Disney Daily? Well, the Pixar film Coco. Now, in that movie, we actually get a whole new dimension called the Land of the Dead. And it is only when Miguel strums the guitar that he's able to cross over into this alternate reality, basically. And so now that I have shown you that there is dimensions mentioned in another Pixar film, my theory probably doesn't look as crazy to you. Or at least I hope it doesn't. Now, my other biggest claim that I made was that souls are basically inside of all of the Pixar characters. And the big question is, have we seen souls before in the Pixar universe? Now, this one is a bit of a stretch, but I still think it's possible. And once, like I said, this movie comes out, we can either say it works or it's debunked. Now, I think we actually saw souls before in the movie Brave. Now, in the movie Brave, I'm not gonna go into all of the details of the movie, but I do wanna point out two specific scenes. The first scene I'm going to highlight is when Merda is trying to find the witch and she follows these blue-like entities all the way to the witch's house. Now, in the movie Brave, and if you looked it up online, they will call it a wisp. Now, I'm simply saying that I personally think these aren't wisps, but they're actually souls. You're probably thinking, well, if they're souls, wouldn't they be inside of a person or an object like you just explained? And I believe these are lost souls. So maybe these were souls that were sent down to Earth but didn't find their target, basically. Now, if you're going, okay, Disney Daily, I still don't really believe you. Well, I have another scene which I feel is very, very convincing. Now, the scene I am referring to is at the very end of the movie when Merida basically faces off against Mordu. And Mordu, we know, is the prince who's basically trapped inside this bear's body. Now, when Mordu is trying to go after Merida, then the stone falls on top of him. And this is the key piece. After the stone falls on the bear's body, a blue figure rises above the bear. And this blue figure at first takes the form of a human. It looks exactly like Merida, her mom, dad. But then this blue figure transforms itself into the little blue wisp that we know of. Now, it is my opinion that we didn't witness a wisp, but rather we witnessed his soul leaving his body because finally he is at peace and finally he can rest. And I think this little soul is going to make its way finally to the great beyond, which we know to be introduced in Soul as the place where souls basically go for their final resting place. And I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I put up a picture of the wisp and souls right next to each other so you can see that these do have a lot of similarities. Now, obviously there are distinctions. I'm not saying they're identical by any means, but I think it's possible that Pixar maybe had an idea for Soul, but they didn't know how they were going to animate it. Now, just so you guys know, and just for clarification, Brave came out way before Soul came out. So maybe they just didn't know what this little blue being was going to evolve into and eventually look like. So just to sum up, I think I have finally made sense of how certain Pixar characters come to life and have a personality and are able to love one another and feel emotions so deeply. I think it's because they have a soul. And again, I think Soul is going to be the unifying movie that ties all of the Pixar films together. And that is why I believe Soul is actually going on at the same time as all of these different movies, because obviously all of these different movies have all of these different people and creatures and objects that need to have a soul in order to come to life and give us a story. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed this theory. I want to hear from you guys and tell me what you think. Honestly, if you like it or if you're having some problems kind of understanding certain areas, I'd be more than happy to clarify in the comments. And again, we're gonna see if this holds up once Pixar Soul actually comes out. But until then, we're gonna have fun with this. As always, thanks for being my guest here at Disney Daily. Until next time.